So thank you so much. Welcome to the Global Business Travel Wellbeing Day, and thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us this afternoon. Really genuinely appreciate it. It's been a wonderful day for everybody, hopefully, and there's been lots of publicity. Just want to say a huge thank you to all of you that have shared some of the marketing around this, have encouraged others to sign up. It's been great. We've had some really great feedback already. I know I can see we're at 61. We've had over 120 sign-ups to this lesson, so it's surprising that so many people are interested in this subject, I guess, right? The four of us, Katie, myself, John and Lucy, we're so proud of all of you for helping support this conversation. And it is so important right now, as you can all imagine. The theme for today is I travel, but I am human. And I think that's really important as we go into some of the conversations that are going to take place in this session, to remind ourselves that this is about travel. That's what we're here for. But also it's to remind us that every single one of us is humans. We're all equal when it comes to what we're made of, We're made of emotions and we're very complex creatures. So it's trying to harness and understand how we can help and support each other as we sort of progress through these challenging moments. I think today really has come at such an opportune moment for us as well. We talked about this day as a community a little while ago, well before the crisis, the global pandemic. There was a thought that maybe we should postpone it, change the date or change the ideas, but actually no, it's really important now because we're at this pause piece. We're stopping to be able to think and talk. So I'm not going to spend too long with this introduction because I want to introduce the people that will be the panelists for the conversations today. To encourage you also, if you have questions, to please submit them using the tools on this Zoom meeting, so please do. But what I did want to share with you very briefly was one of our group, Katie, this morning posted something on LinkedIn which I think really summarizes the essence of what we are. And I just want to read it to you, and please just humour me for a second. If I'm looking down, it's because I haven't prepared it and I haven't learned it off pat. I think it was really important. It resonated so well with me. And the piece says, the road warriors, so this is about the road warriors who try to balance their love for travel with maintaining self-care on the road, the parents who travel and miss their children, the first-time business traveller who's excited to see the world, the loved ones of business travellers left at home who struggle to maintain things on their own, the long-lasting friends who you meet during your business travels, the business travellers who never get asked how they're feeling upon returning from a trip, the person crying in the hotel room from exhaustion and loneliness who just wants to be at home, the executives who travel endlessly to see their employees and show them support, the person who looks forward to one trip a year to a conference where they gain knowledge and insight, and the people who return from business trips with new energy, ideas, and connections. That's what we are. We're a community there. That represents all of us. Those are the notes that Katie shared. Please look up what Katie put on LinkedIn this morning because I genuinely felt it touches to my heart and to everybody's. I've had my own experiences with mental health and challenges when I travelled, and I can recognise those in there. So please, as we have these conversations, as we think about the content and the context that we want to push forward for the future, consider all of those elements. Thank you, Katie, for those. I really do appreciate those. So I'm going to pass you over to Lucy in a second, who's going to introduce or ask the panels to introduce. She's going to introduce the first conversation. The structure for this will be, just to give you an idea, we are going to have 3 questions. There will be 3 questions that will be asked over sort of 15 minutes each. There will be the ability to ask questions to those panelists or the panelists that are going to be introduced to you. If you want to do any marketing while we're doing this, we'd love you to. If you want to send out any posts, marketing, raise the profile, the awareness, please feel free. Please do use the hashtags, hashtag BTW Day and hashtag, I'm wearing one, 24-hour humans. So please do use those, really important. During the conversations, you are on mute, or if you're not on mute, if you could put yourself on mute, we would really appreciate that, just so we don't have too much background noise. We obviously have become more considerate to dogs barking and children running in during these meetings, so don't fear or worry if that's happening. We don't need a BBC reporter, sort of somebody pushing kids away. So Lucy, I'm going to pass over to you if that's okay. So thank you, welcome. Please do enjoy the session, and Lucy, over to you.
Thanks, Matt. You've touched on some really interesting points there. Just before I go on to introduce everyone, I'm just going to take you all back to briefly to what seems like a lifetime ago, although it was only 2 months ago. And you might notice Matt is now, I don't know if you can see him, is now drinking out of a cup. And I have a very similar one here, and I don't know if you can see this. So on the front of it, Matt had these made for everyone with Business Traveller Wellbeing. So if anybody wants one of these, could you please let us know and we can arrange that for you as a they're pretty cool to have these as part of the community. So now on to the amazing panelists. We are so thrilled that you are giving all of your time and your insights today. Really, really honoured to have 5 wonderful people. So we've got Alice Lindley Munro, Matthew Judge, Pat McDonough, Debbie Verdi, and Lee Bocciccio. So I will hand over to each of you, please, to introduce yourselves briefly, and then we'll go on to the first topic. So we'll start with Alice, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Alice Lindley Munro and I'm the travel manager for Oil Spill Response based down in Southampton.
Fantastic. Let's go for Matthew.
Hi there, good afternoon everybody, or good morning, depending on where you are. My name's Matthew Judge. I'm the Group Managing Director for the Amble Group. We're a organisational resilience and travel risk management specialist, and I'm based in sunny Christchurch in Dorset.
Thank you. And Pat.
Hi everyone, I'm Pat McDonough. I'm Chief Executive of Clarity. We're one of the largest TMCs in the UK.
Thanks, Pat. Lee?
Hey, good afternoon, good morning. I'm Lee Bocciccio. I'm the Executive Director for the Association of Corporate Travel Executives.
Thank you. And last but not least, Debbie.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Debbie Verdi. I've been in the supply space 20 years, notably with Accor and with Starwood, and more recently, I was heading up Northern Europe for HRS.
Amazing, thank you. So the first topic, I don't know if any of you saw this on the website, is well-being is fake news. So very, very topical right now. And it's raised a number of questions. For example, is the business travel industry all talk and no action? And also the current crisis, what does that mean for, I guess, well-being and mental health and physical health in the future? So Alice, over to you first. What's your perspective on whether well-being is fake news?
Absolutely not. In fact, I've spent more time since the pandemic sort of emerged talking about well-being than I ever have before. And we're applying it in a far broader spectrum now. And we're asking our key stakeholders what well-being means to them and looking at it very, very broadly. And I know that everybody's got lots of things that they need to focus on in terms of cost saving and trying to get back on the road, but they're not going to be able to do it without thinking about people's well-being, because there's a lot of confidence issues with our staff at the moment. Obviously, the company I work for, we've still got people travelling, and we are struggling to find people that are feeling confident to travel because of what's going on. So we really have to think about their well-being, and that will continue moving forward because there are so many uncertainties in the industry at the moment that we're walking into the unknown, and you can't do. I and Oil Spill Response feel you can't do that without focusing on well-being.
Definitely. And what do you think is going to happen with the social distancing then?
I mean, we're trying to work out what we're going to do for social distancing and what that might look like. And I think our key thing at the moment is trying to reduce travel by only letting people go if it's a spill, but then we still have to try and social distance when we're on a spill. And what does that look like? And it's about contacting suppliers and trying to think. Our travel team sat down and went through every stage of our journey. So every stage of a trip life cycle, from when the person gets picked up from home to when they get back to home, to think about all those bits where they would have to social distance and what tips we can give them. So for example, queuing in the airport, they worked out that if they socially distance an airline queue, it would be 1 kilometre long. So then you've got to think about that. If you've got lots of flights going from an airport, how does that look like? So it's important to sort of leave no stone unturned. And we're referring to it internally as human factors. So it's the human factors of traveling rather than just thinking about the cost or getting on the flight. So that's become quite a key term for us at the moment.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting because it raises the issue about the price tag possibly. Pat, what's your perspective on that as the CEO of a TMC from the price tag perspective?
Well, I think you're starting to see, aren't you, that a number of the airlines and the airports as well are coming out, maybe questioning the wisdom of some of these measures. So Alice referred to, I think, something the guys from Heathrow Airport said the other day, which was, you know, social distancing in an airport isn't practical. The press are very good at the moment, I think, of putting that real negative thought into our heads about how difficult things may be. So there was talk of people going on holiday and, you know, having perspex screens in between sunbeds and things like that. Well, we know that the fact is that if that's the case, we won't do it. Lufthansa just the other day issued a mandate that everybody traveling with them had to wear PPE, had to wear a mask. But what that meant, they said, was that they don't have to now socially distance the flights. So what you're going to find is suppliers trying to find a middle ground that we think is practical. Michael O'Leary last week was very clear that Ryanair can't operate on load factors under about 60 or 70%, or prices have to rise. So you've got real challenges about what's practical and economic, whilst also people wanting to stay safe and travel with confidence. And I don't think that at this moment in time anybody's found that sweet spot. We're not going to travel without risk on the other side of this, but we didn't do that beforehand. And I think we need to get used to that idea, take reasonable precautions, manage ourselves properly through this, but also just make sure that we're feeling better about what we're doing, confident enough to travel. And, you know, there's a real responsibility on employers to do that. The current situation brings well-being into really sharp focus, doesn't it? Because there will be people desperate to get out there, and then there'll be people who are terrified at the prospect. And we need to make sure that we cater for everybody within that when we think about getting people moving again.
That's interesting. And how do you think the confidence and the anxiety around that can be managed from a risk perspective?
I think with anything, everybody carries out their own personal risk assessment on things, even though they might not write it down on paper. When you go out and do something, you consider the factors involved. I think the best way I could articulate it is the wife test in my case. You know, if I'm going somewhere traveling on business and I can explain it to my wife and she feels confident that that's a safe way of doing things, it's the right thing to do, then that's good enough for me. And I think, you know, this is going to become probably something that's actually more rigorously documented. It's so important that businesses are seen to and ensure that people are considering these things before they go. So we're probably formalising these things a little bit more, and there are probably more places that people would travel to where they would consider there to be some kind of risk. But it can be amazing sometimes how people don't consider those risks when they're travelling on business. It's so important that people do take responsibility and think about things.
Definitely. Matthew, I know that obviously Anvil do a lot on risk. What's your perspective on whether well-being will be fake news or be higher up on the agenda?
It's certainly not fake news, in our opinion. It's never been more important. Obviously, it's always been important, but I think never more right now is it going to be important. You know, obviously corporations and the economy has taken quite a blow due to the different lockdowns in different countries, and those organisations will be looking to try and get back to business as usual as quickly as possible. Obviously, what will govern that will be different public health and government guidelines as we move through the different stages. And of course, different countries are in different stages of the pandemic and their lockdown periods and their controls. So organisations are looking to get people back into the workplace. People are already thinking and planning about that now. And of course, shortly after that will become you know, the need for travel, I'm sure, and therefore, you know, the well-being of individuals will be paramount to give them the confidence in which they feel they can start to travel again. And they'll be looking to their employers and their organisations much more critically now and in those future stages than I think they ever have done before.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I guess that raises the whole issue about what does that mean for responding to the sort of duty of care requirements, I guess, around that. Yeah.
Well, duty of care obviously, you know, means something slightly different in different jurisdictions, but essentially, if we look at European legislation, if you like, a duty of care is a legal obligation that is owed to any employee of your organisation, and that's governed in the main by European legislation called the Health and Safety at Work Act, of which now COVID has become a reportable condition under the RIDOR infectious disease reporting requirements in the workplace. So when we look at these changes in legislation, changes in labour legislation and health and safety, and of course there's different health and safety legislation and labour laws in different countries around the world in which our organisations are operating in. And it's going to be imperative for organisations to understand that landscape and keep up with it as it will change. Different controls will be brought into place. For travel to be enabled, there will be additional controls put into place to do with quarantine when you're travelling to and from different locations. There will even be requirements for testing to be done before you're able to be issued a work visa or a work permit in certain countries, as a lot of those work permits and visas were revoked as we went into lockdown. So it's a very complex landscape moving forward. And I think to get back to the point, we will overcome that. We will deal with that. Organisations and business is resilient and it will start to travel again. But the travellers and the employees will be looking to their organisations to give them unambiguous information in good time, at the right time, for them to be able to feel confident that they are being looked after in the appropriate way, and that will enable them to travel again.
Yeah, definitely. Lee, as Executive Director of ACT, what do you think will be the challenges around that?
Challenges around the duty of care or getting people back to, I mean, I think overall right now in terms of the well-being, I think there's some scary stuff, but I think there's huge opportunity for travel managers to align within their organizations with other departments such as legal and HR to make sure that you're looking at all the different taking into consideration all those things before bringing people back to work. So I think there's a lot more opportunity for travel managers to get more involved and have a greater seat at the table when it comes to this.
Okay. I'm just, yeah, definitely. And Devi, do you have any comments on that before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, the question really is well-being fake news? I think, well-being as a topic has evolved so much in the space of last 5 years, even if we look at where we were 5 years ago to where we are today. And, the whole conventional duty of care and traveler satisfaction, it's been taken at face value. It's been focused on simply getting travelers safe and really at home. And, today we know that doesn't really fit the bill. And I think going back to what Pat was saying, it's not just going to be enforced, it's going to be forced. And this has just accelerated the real topic more than anything. And, we know that, and I think for myself and, coming from a supplier's angle, travel managers have traditionally focused on and looked at travel from a procurement viewpoint, right? Focusing more on the whole spend of the compliance piece. And now more than ever, this is a great opportunity to really look at the data, the metrics that really go behind that, and that what focuses around, for me, it's the productivity and that whole retention piece that comes into this. Going back to what Alice said earlier, it is starting with a fresh people first perspective on business travel, and one that really puts that whole overall well-being and satisfaction of the traveler, so the employee. And Pat, you touched on that earlier on. It's that accountability of the traveler, policy and program consideration.
So, yeah. Thank you. Sorry, please continue.
No, that's all right. That's okay. I think, from a hotel point of view, hotels have come a long way as suppliers, right? The whole wellness in hotels, has moved well beyond the realms of just fitness and spa areas. That is for sure. Across global chains, they've all got now VPs in their remits. They are taking this seriously, across the brands, and it's a sophisticated approach. But ultimately, from a program perspective, it's who's driving the program. And that's exactly back to Lee's point, is bringing those other business units into the space of driving this forward. Because ultimately, it'll be down to personalization, and that is going to be key. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So personalization, people first. Yeah, I like it. Okay. Very interesting comments there. I think one thing that popped up was somebody said all talk and no action. So hopefully this means that there'll be a lot of action in the future around well-being. Before we go on to the next topic, I think Katie had a poll that she was going to release for everybody. Am I right in thinking?
Yep. Somewhere.
Okay, just give everyone a second to answer that. I'm assuming everyone can see it.
Yep.
Great. Nice. So that was, do you feel that well-being is a high priority for travel? 65% have answered yes. So considering there's over 100 people on the call, that's pretty good. That's probably sort of slightly over 70 people. So that's fantastic. Good, nice. Okay. So we'll close that one and go on to the next topic. So the next one is to care or not to care. And some of the comments that came out about this were travel managers who report to HR tend to have a much better focus on business travelers as people and bring in that people first, that human factors element that Alice mentioned, rather than purely cost. Discuss. What does everybody think about that? Feel free to go.
I'll jump in.
To go first. Okay, yeah.
I can't.
No, I was just going to say that, that may absolutely be the case. Oh, sorry. That may absolutely be the case. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. If you report into HR, you're going to have a different lens than in procurement, but it doesn't mean that you can't have both lenses. And I think that's where I was saying earlier, I think this is a huge opportunity. If you work, if you report into procurement, you may be primarily focused on cost savings and things like that. Those are things that we've been doing for years now. Those metrics exist. They're commonly used. People can get access to them. But this is a real opportunity, I think, to get other types of metrics to take a more balanced approach to your overall program. And there's a lot of data that's within HR. Yes, there's personal information that you have to be careful with, but there's a real opportunity to partner with HR and understand what their goals are, which is retention, right? It costs a lot more money to hire people. But how are they focused on retention? A lot of that has to do with travel. We know that people ask more about policies and things like that. So although travel managers, if you're reporting into HR, you might be more sensitive to that, I don't necessarily, it means that you can't be just as sensitive if you're reporting into procurement. And quite frankly, I think it even gives you an opportunity to, I think, to get a really great seat at the table, because you're not only looking at cost savings, but you're really looking at how it impacts performance, and performance impacts the overall business that you support. So it's not just about cost savings, but it's about how are we driving revenue, and what are the decisions that you're making about your program to make sure that you're driving the right revenue while also balancing that cost side of it. So definitely great information in HR, and anyone that's in HR has been I've been in HR in the past. There's a lot of great detail out there, data that's available without crossing the privacy lines, that if you're partnering with HR can really help in looking at it, taking a different approach and looking at your overall program.
Let's not assume as well that traveller wellbeing is the enemy of cost, because it doesn't have to be.
Right.
And this might not translate very well to those of you in different parts of the world, but I'm going for it anyway. So one of my regular journeys is by intercity train between Manchester and London. And anytime return tickets or a fully flexible ticket on that journey is £350, which is quite staggering really for a standard fare or thereabouts. Now, businesses or people may take fares like that because they're demanded to be in the centre of London by 9 AM in the morning, which means that they have to be up at some ungodly hour and try and make it for that particular meeting. They don't think about the impact on their people, and they're also not at that point thinking about the impact on cost. If you were to change that ticket to a less flexible off-peak fare and have that meeting at 1 PM in the afternoon, you could save £300 on that single ticket. So it just shows you what you can do, where you're actually thinking, actually, I'm going to ask people to come along a bit later in the day. That's easier for everybody to do. And I'm going to save the business money alongside that. Now, one of the things being talked about at the moment is to maintain social distancing around busy airports and transport hubs and so on, is that more people may actually travel at off-peak times to smooth the demand around these locations. Well, again, we're potentially balancing well-being with the cost. And, you know, these are basic physical well-being aspects, but, you know, they're going to be really important. So we shouldn't always assume that we have to make some really difficult and aspirational business case around things like retention, engagement, and discretional effort, when actually right in front of your eyes there may be win-win situations where you can save money and also enhance the well-being of the traveller.
I think I come at it slightly differently, because oil spill, we always refer to ourselves as a family. I'm in the enviable position of knowing all of my travellers. We've got less than 300 staff globally. But in the past 9 years since working in travel at oil spill, I've reported into our response department, so into the kind of hub of the spill response. I've reported to our operations department, I've reported to HR, and I now report into logistics. But I think I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I wasn't keeping that view of travellers as people. And yes, you have the different departments having different focuses. So now I'm in logistics, it's very process focused, and we're looking at how we move cargo. And I keep saying to my boss that cargo is easy to move because it can't complain, and whereas people have additional needs to moving equipment. But it's always got to be about that human factor, that person. You can't just see your traveller as a number, even if you are reporting to the C-suite about cost savings, or you are talking to, you know, it's got to be at the forefront. And that might be a bit controversial to say I'm not doing my job properly if I don't see my travellers as humans, but that really is core of how we operate.
Yeah, I think, you know, Alice, you're touching on a very poignant, you know, point here, and particularly with your business, where you're very privileged that you've actually, you know, worked with so many different business units. And, you know, for a business moving forward, it's, you know, you have to justify when, not if, your business can travel again, right? So, you know, the CEO, a COO, and head of HR is going to be looking moving forward at the whole hygiene and the safety factor. On the flip side, your CFO and your CPO is looking at the P&L, right? And that is where it's at. So the basics of the compliance to the policy, you know, is the hotel open? Does the hotel have full service? Is it limited service? You know, when we talk about social distancing, how is that all going to work from each of the travelers' touch point and that journey, the traveler journey or the customer journey? You know, smart check-in, smart checkout, virtual payment, all this where they're, you know, hospitality is all about creating experiences. That's what it's fundamentally all about. You know, where is that going to come in, and how will that come in and transpire? And I think, you know, traveller wellbeing is really, you know, it's a blank piece of paper. It's allowing businesses to look at the P&L of the travel component, which at the moment is pretty much started at zero, and to really build that back up and to go, these are the two core components that are going to be needed for an organization to be a stronger business moving forward.
I think there's several aspects here that we need to consider, and we're talking a lot about the physical aspects of well-being, but of course there's a major part that we're missing, which is the psychological aspects of people's well-being. You know, their emotional states, their mental health, all of which may have been put under extreme pressure during this particular periods of lockdown. You know, we've all experienced this ongoing lockdown or the lockdowns we've had in very different ways, and we've been exposed to different things during the lockdown periods, which can include you know, elements of dealing with grief because of losing loved ones or family members, the anxieties of working on our own in different environments, and that's going to create a whole range of problems when people start to try and think about coming back into the workplace, let alone even going on business trips and travelling abroad. So I think, you know, there is an opportunity for organisations to bring those different stakeholders together, but also include, you know, occupational health, health and safety, and any well-being consultants that they have within their organisations, because occupational health is going to play such a massive part, and that emotional state of our employees is going to be so important to getting them travelling and willing to travel again. And I think the more that these different stakeholders can come together and address those aspects, and also understand, are people resilient enough yet to be able to travel? Is their mental health in a state that you know, allows them to travel abroad to other countries in this current environment? And how do they help them with that and get them back to you know, a stable perspective where they can be reintegrated into the workplace and into travel again?
Yeah, we've taken one step back from thinking about getting people travelling to thinking about getting people back into the office and what it looks like and how that might feel for someone, because we've got staff that live quite some distance away, and they're seeing the change in their well-being by not having the commute, and so they're feeling anxious about having to go back to that commute and what that looks like change for their family life. So we've actually just started, our learning and development team have started doing some work with our staff families around stress and around how to deal with it. I can see Matt giggling away in the corner, how to deal with it, because for us travel still feels like it's quite far off, other than field travel that we have to do. The idea of getting people back on a plane still feels quite far away. We've got hurdles to overcome before that happens. It's like softly approach.
Yeah, I mean, there's far better qualified people than me, I would say, to touch on the aspects of mental health and psychological health. But from what I do understand, you know, these periods and time are triggering people that have had issues in the past may be experiencing those symptoms again right now because of the different challenges with lockdown. And therefore, whilst they might not be back in the state they were previously, the symptomatic responses they're experiencing right now are very real and very similar.
Yeah, and I was giggling at the cat that made an appearance on the Zoom. My dog bashed her tail against it. That's what I was giggling at. So
Sorry, I was too.
My cat is just out of shot and has been pestering me all through. So if he appears,
oh, lovely. Yeah, okay, interesting points then. And I have to say I was pleased to see the psychological component being raised there, as well as the physical health consideration, and that there's a mental and a psychological safety element to this as well now. Well, there always has been, but that's sort of coming a lot more to the forefront. So based upon what you're all saying, it sounds as if all the thinking around that's going to be evolving quite quickly, which will be really good to see. And what's obviously sort of we've touched upon, or you've all touched upon the sort of cost factor. But I guess this brings us naturally onto the next topic, which was ROI, which is obviously going to be high on people's agendas going forwards with the economic situation. But how necessary do you think that will be to move wellbeing forwards and get all this all these thoughts into action to prepare people for travel, and then enabling wellbeing of people when they're actually traveling?
I think, Lucy, we're probably looking at the very, very basics at first. So people are people happy and confident traveling? And we're probably away from the more aspirational things we would have been talking about in a more business as usual context. So for me, there's no return on investment case to be made for this. If a business needs to get people moving again because it inherently knows that it needs to do business. And I said the other day when we were chatting about this to Alice, you can't clear an oil spill virtually, but I think you suggested there may be ways you can assist. But certainly for businesses to get back to doing business, they're going to have to get their people out on the road. They're going to have to get them happy and comfortable doing that, and they're going to have to do it properly as well. So there's in my mind, no case to be made for this from a return on investment perspective. You have to do it. It's like for us, we took this isn't particularly travel related, but we took a decision. Well, it is actually, when we think about it. We took a decision to cancel our own internal conference. And the cost of that cancellation went out the window because the cost or potential cost to the business of getting something like that badly wrong could be far, far greater. So, we look at things in a different way in the current scenario. And I think actually it's just very much, look, we've got to look after our people. We've got to do things in the right way. They've got to be confident going out there in order for us to get back to business. And that's the bottom line. It's not really too difficult an equation, I think, for most businesses. And the decision around that will be right up the chain in most businesses. At what point do we get traveling again? Certainly, that will be a decision that I make with my exec team, and it won't be delegated further down the organization. I think it comes, right up the agenda around the boardroom.
We had a wellbeing committee call this morning. The committee is a very new thing. It only started when we started working from home. And we're basically told that there is no budget other than to get people mental health first aid trained. So one of the things we were discussing is keeping going the work we've been doing since we've all been working virtually, which is just around conversation, and it's around inspiring people to talk to each other. And we've actually stolen an idea from ITM of the 60-second interview, and we've been getting people throughout the business to just fill those out and put them on our wellbeing site to try and get to know each other and just help those conversations become quite natural, because then we don't have to spend money. You don't have to spend money to have a conversation. And we're seeing that people are making bonds within the company that weren't there before, and with people that weren't there before. So we've got 4 channels for wellbeing: eat, move, sleep and relax. And we're seeing that people are naturally finding their comfort zone of which of those channels they want to discuss. So that for us doesn't cost us anything. Obviously, keeping people safe when they're traveling, the places that we go to, we will do whatever it takes, but we're looking at how creative we can be with what we can bring in that doesn't cost us anything, because obviously everyone is trying to save money.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that it might not be just like, the return on investment might be more about different decisions that you make about who travels and when they travel. So if you're doing team selling or anything like that, you might say, we're not going to do that. We're going to be careful about what we spend. We're also going to be careful about who we're sending and how we're caring for them while they're on the road. So those are some of the conversations that I've heard, that some companies are thinking that when we do start traveling, we're going to change our policy. It's not going to be that anyone goes, but we're going to be a little bit stricter about what technology we're using, how we're using it depending upon the role that you play within the organization. And then when we do make the decision that you have to travel, who really has to be on that trip with you, and are we making smart decisions about that? So I think that's a different way of looking at it. It's not that you're not thinking about the care of the traveler, but there's two aspects of that. There is that, you know, how are we spending our money wisely, and are we also spending it in a way that takes care of the people that actually have to travel and limits our risk in the number of people that do. So I think there's just going to be different conversations with companies in terms of how you might be changing your policy. I think as we're all getting a little bit more comfortable using this technology and being able to have meetings like this, we're going to see more of that. So I think the way that we conduct business is going to be different.
And it's interesting you say that, Lee, because I think I fully agree with you that, you know, yes, that, you know, all of a sudden everybody's learned how to use Zoom, you know, Slack, whether it's Microsoft Teams. You know, I know my kids have it for school, you know, but I think I would also say that by and large, you know, as a group of travel industry and mental and well-being health experts, is also, you know, by and large, people do like that connection. People feel that connection is also really valuable and important, whether it's achieving success, right, for yourself or your business. And you're all right in saying that it is going to be scrutinized. This is now not just enforced it has forced it, and it'll accelerate and combine it into really having the right individuals in that table to really look at where the components actually sit. And I think culture of a company, in fact, here is really key, you know, in order to have that sort of successful, you know, for me, it's that next third phase of a maturity of a travel wellness program, you know, when that happens. And I think this is the time, you know, Alice, if you look at, you know, where you are at, where you're touching every other business unit that's been out there, based on the size of your organization, is actually you're in a very privileged, you know, position. And I think, you know, despite all the challenges that are ahead of us, I think this is really offering a fantastic opportunity, because ultimately we are facing a complete reset, and, you know, everything has to restart somehow. And it is going to be down to the individual organizations, how they build those core elements into their individual travelers. And I think, Pat, you know, we discussed this when we talked earlier on in the week. It is going to be down to also the individual traveler, right? As to, you know, when you are there at the point of checking in, when you're there at the airport, when you're there at the hotel, also your accountability and how much accountability you as an individual are taking when you're the one that's traveling. And it's going back to, I guess, you know, the sum up of today is, I travel, I'm human, and the opposite way around, you know, I'm human, I travel. Yeah.
I think I couldn't agree more with Debbie there. I think one of the aspects that Debbie's just mentioned, which I think is important, is the decisions that we're making now that set the policy and the tone for the future in our organisations with travel will be looked upon, you know, by our employees within our organisations, and it's going to impact the future organisational culture of our operations. The decisions we make now will affect employee loyalty, I think, so there'll be a whole element around perception and engagement of travellers and employees in general in your organisation, looking at that loyalty perspective. And if we make the wrong decisions now, it could be incredibly damaging to that cultural aspect in the future.
For example, I think when all this started, one of my team said to me, people will remember what we did, for good or for bad. And I think, you know, coming through the other side of this, as we start traveling again, your travelers will remember what you as a business did in facilitating that and giving them confidence, in looking after them, in forewarning them and arming them with the right information before they travel. So, you know, we're at this kind of seminal moment with this. It's so important that we get it right.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That it leads me on to ask one question, which is maybe in everyone's mind. How do you think we can get it right, Pat? What's the best, what do you think is the best thing to do?
Information's everything, isn't it? And one of the things I think I keep saying, and saying this both in my work life and in my personal life, because there are stresses and strains in both areas, and people want to know now what's going to happen in a few weeks' time. And part of this is, yeah, we can plan, we can understand what the scenarios are, but in some ways we have to wait and see what happens, and we have to see what our supply chain are going to do. We have to see what the numbers are looking like in terms of infection rates and territories and so on. We have to make sure that we're providing as much information back to the travellers so that they can make informed choices, and to businesses so that they can set informed policies and make sure that their travellers are making informed choices as well. So for me, it's information, continuous communication of that information, trying to cut through the, I don't want to say fake news, the hysteria in the media, because if you read that stuff, my God, that can drag you down in the morning, can't it? If you read most of the press, I think try and stick to the facts. Try and be positive in terms of, things will change over time, things will become clearer. And where you can't control these things, then it is almost, just accepting that fact and waiting for things to develop. And I know that's difficult, but keeping informed throughout that is so important. It really is.
Definitely. Okay, well, I'm sure everybody's got loads and loads of questions. I can see the chat function going a bit wild. Before we go on to that, we've got another couple of polls to release, which Katie's going to release. So if you could all bear with us for a second. There we go, there's the first one. Do you think companies will be including well-being as part of duty of care? So I'll give you all a minute to answer that. I'm actually not sure what to answer.
Yeah.
That's tough. And the third one's making me think, well, there's psychological safety and physical safety, so they're both interesting. So there we have, kind of even 44 and 45%. Safety will have more focus on well-being, and well-being will be a core component of duty of care. Okay, that's interesting. That seems to be, yeah, that seems to, I guess, align quite well with the conversation so far. And I'm very pleased to see 11% said companies only pretend to care. That's good. That's good. That's the perspective of everyone. Okay, we'll get do we have the next poll now?
Yep.
What's the most important enabler to calculate well-being ROI? Oh, that's a tough one as well. Okay, let's see what the responses are. Okay, 51% traveler engagement. Okay, that's pretty high. And 18% we're suggesting that well-being ROI cannot be calculated. So maybe that relates to all the different parts of being human, perhaps. Okay, interesting. So I think we're probably best, because we've got about 9 minutes left, to maybe just move on to the Q&A. Matt, did you see any particular questions pop up that would be quite interesting for the panel?
Yeah, I think John had shared a few of those questions, so let me just double check.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so we had one in, I think we'd addressed some of it as we were going through. So Megan had asked, do you feel like well-being needs to be defined? I think many think it's exercise, diet, and how to expand that into mental health. Do you think as an industry we need a clearer definition? So throw that question into the conversation for everybody.
I think it would help actually. It's a bit like sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
How many of you would associate sustainability with green issues, almost entirely green issues? It's not. It goes far beyond there. And I think well-being perhaps has a similar kind of challenge. I think people think these are all nice to have things, but you know, as Lucy suggested before, it's, you know, things like psychological safety. You know, people's state of mind. It's that important. So defining it really helps. And I think sometimes we do struggle with people understanding the very definition of it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks,
I think because everybody has we find that everybody has a different definition of what well-being is. So for some people it's having a hot bath and reading a book and getting an early night, and for some people it's running a half marathon. But I think there needs to be some kind of overarching framework so that no topic gets left behind, because some companies really focus on one side of it and forget about the rest of it. So it's more difficult to get people to engage if you're not covering all of the topics. So yeah, I think there should be a high level kind of framework.
Brilliant. Yeah, and you know, this community represents so many elements of well-being, right? We've got everything covered in this group of amazing people that are on this call. And yes, so you know, we need a catch-all sort of something to define it. Lee, did you want to give a perspective from the ACT view, maybe?
Well, no, I was just going to say, I agree. I think well-being is similar to what Pat said. It's like sustainability. How do you look at that? And I think it's, I just, you know, I said this earlier, I think that there's been this opportunity in the past because of what's happening now, and even greater opportunity to leverage data, leverage your partners that are out there, your TMC, what data they can provide you, and work internally to figure it out. The only other thing that I would say is that I feel like we've done some webinars. We've had suppliers on, we've had buyers on. Everybody wants answers today, and there just aren't any right now, right? So I would just say for the travel managers that are on this call, I think the best thing that you can do is, you know, relook at what your policy is today, reach out to your internal partners, HR especially, and legal. You have to understand what your company culture is, right? And what does that mean, and how will that change given what's happening? So I think there's a lot of internal work that really has to be done before we're going to get some of the answers externally in terms of what are suppliers doing. Our hotel is going to give you a personal care package when you go in to keep your room clean, right? So I think there's a lot of work that we can do internally before we start getting too concerned about how is the world around us going to react.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lee. And Matthew, did you have anything you wanted to add on to that?
Yeah, I think each organisation should, you know, have a framework or a declaration almost for what they see or how they see well-being and what it contains. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there isn't a universal, you know, framework for that, and if there is one, it would be fantastic to see. So to help organisations define it, but never has there been such an opportunity, I think, to break down the existing silos that seem to exist in our large corporate organisations, to beat and break down those walls that create those silos and bring those stakeholders together around one common cause. You know, I think taking each of their individual responsibilities and accountabilities, but bringing it to the table for the greater good of the organisation and the employees ultimately, now represents the time to do that.
Brilliant, thank you, Matthew. And Debbie, just yourself, if there was anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, simple yes. I think, you know, having dealt with so many different organisations from a corporate side, different industry sectors, everybody does have a different meaning when you put well-being on. You know, for some there might be a cost element to it, for others they look at it completely different. So I think, you know, going back to Megan's question, you know, I think absolutely there should be a framework of some sort which would then help and support this community and you know, travel buyers, yeah, and suppliers as well.
Brilliant. And thank you, Debbie, and thank you all for your comments on that. I think we're going to have to sort of close this session shortly, which is a real shame because there is so many things we can talk about, and this could just go on and on and on and on and on. You know, maybe we were stretching ourselves, trying a bit hard to keep it within an hour. Maybe we needed to give it a little bit longer. I can see there are so many really good messages in the chat as well. What I suggest we probably will do with those is we will obviously consolidate all of those questions. We'll then circulate those with everybody that's in attendance to this, and we'll make sure that everybody gets access to the resources that people are referring to. There's been some great things in there. Some people have already got frameworks in there, which I think is brilliant. This is what the community is really about for me, and I'm going to let Katie close the session, but just from my perspective, just briefly, the community is about sharing, it's about collaborating, and it's about learning from each other. And I genuinely feel that this is a movement that creates this much greater voice around traveller wellbeing. I know we don't have all the answers, and I definitely don't. I can talk about this stuff a little bit, but I don't have it all. So just let's keep this conversation moving forward. Let's keep this conversation energy up as well. We've got to keep this energy up, especially at the moment. I just wanted to touch on one thing that was mentioned about mental health. Please, I just wanted to spend 1 second or just a few seconds on this. What's really important right now is our mental health has never been so challenged, and this is the reality that we're all facing. And that's not just us, that's all of our colleagues, our family and our friends, and we need to be really conscious of that. Doing a session this morning with the Business Travel Association talking about some of these issues, some of the challenges, was really important. And we all need to just remind ourselves that the minimum we want to come through this is maintaining our mental well-being. We want to try and improve it, of course, by doing some of the wonderful things that you will offer. But actually we've got to try and maintain. This is a hard moment. This is a crisis and a pandemic that we're in. There are many opportunities and we're seeing some green shoots, but please be really mindful of what that means. Look after your mental health. And that's my sort of, not sales pitch, but it's just me being, human and reminding you we're all humans first, right? Before we do anything else. So thank you so much. Katie, I'm going to pass it over to you. I need an airplane or something to give to you, I guess, to pass it over. But if you want to just close the session, that would be fantastic, and thank you all.
Yes, and thank you very much to all of our panelists for your input and insights. Very valuable. We are recording everything that's going on in the chat as well, so we'll try to address any questions that we didn't get to today and share out the recording as well from today. I know there was lots of great discussion around a framework, so maybe what everyone shares will be able to then I'll come under the umbrella of the community as well. We do have a LinkedIn page. We have a website. You can register on our website and have your bio and information up there and available and be able to make connections with everyone else in the community. So use those resources. And we will continue to be sharing out our perspectives, the community's perspectives in terms of thought leadership pieces through different different avenues. So please keep an eye out for that. And in closing, keep this date for next year. This will be our annual Business Travel Wellbeing Day next year. Maybe some of us will be in person together next year. We will see. And lastly, one of our themes for today as well is hug yourself. So if you haven't done any self-care today, if you haven't given yourself a nice hug today, if you want to post a picture of that on your social media, go for it. But hopefully everyone gives themselves some self-care today as well. So once again,
I was just going to say thanks, Katie, for giving that. I've told the team there, I haven't actually touched another human being since the Business Travel Show. And that's been about coming up for 2.5 months, and that's getting really strange. So a hug is needed. So good shout, Katie.
All right. Thank you, everyone.